Just a quick listener note. This show contains raw conversation about drugs, alcohol, childhood trauma, sexual assault, active addiction, and suicide. It also contains coarse language. Please use care when listening, and I hope you enjoy the episode. Welcome back to another episode of Recovery APN. I'm joined by Andy, as always.
Hey, Dan. How you doing, bub?
I'm doing well. We just had an incredible episode with Jennie.
Yeah, truly, an inspirational story. I mean, Jennie shows lots of, courage and being brave coming on the show and being open and honest and vulnerable with us and really exploring, kind of what got her to APN. And it was very inspirational to hear how well she's doing now.
Yeah, being able to sit here and have that conversation with her, it's almost like a newfound respect I have for our alumni.
Yeah.
Because you don't always get to know them before they come into the room, and to hear her story, but more importantly, to hear how she got through it and to see where she is today is just incredible.
Incredible. Yeah, like you said, sometimes we just get the tip of the iceberg, and to hear kind of all of it collectively, and then to see how she kind of worked through it and came here to kind of get the foundation laid in her life is it's inspirational.
Yeah, and I do think that there are a lot of people out there that will get a lot out of it, and again, find that inspiration through her words.
Absolutely. I'm excited for everybody to listen.
Yep, so let's kick it over to us. Jennie, thank you for joining us.
Welcome.
Hello, thank you. It's nice to be here. It's my pleasure.
Yeah, it's great to see you. Great to put a face with the name.
Yes.
Yeah, we've been talking. Although I did see you over FaceTime one time.
Did we?
Yeah,
Okay.
We did that little snippet. But
Okay. Oh, yeah, that's right. Yep.
I wasn't invited to that FaceTime. I appreciate that, guys.
but no, it's we appreciate you coming.
Thank you for having me.
How was the trip in?
It was fabulous. Yeah. I was a little nervous about the little plane coming from Eagle into Denver. I actually opted out of that one when I came to APN initially. I was like, oh, it's going to snow. It's going to be a little plane. So I took the drive, but this time I took the little plane, and it wasn't bad at all. It was a really smooth flight. I think after APN 2, I've noticed that my experience flying is also way smoother, lower anxiety. I'm way less stressed out. It's really interesting. I don't seem to hate flying as much as I used to.
You told me yesterday, too, you hit some turbulence, too. How did that,
Oh.
like your stomach's still at, 8,000 feet or however high they fly. I don't know.
We hit some pretty intense turbulence. We fell enough to drop my stomach several times, took my breath away several times. And I actually really enjoyed it. It was like I didn't pay for the extra ride, but it was great. It was a nice thrill, and it reminded me that I'm alive, and I'm glad to be on the ground now. So
awesome.
Yeah, that flight is tough. It's a tough flight.
It can be. It can be. It's like, it can be.
I like adrenaline though, so it was fine.
Oh, okay. How was your experience? We just drove up to the lodge. What were those feelings like coming up here?
I kept thinking how odd it is that I'm so excited to go back to treatment. Like, what an interesting thought that is. Like, most people would not be excited to go back to, like, a treatment facility, and I've just been stoked. I'm so thrilled. It feels amazing to be back here. It feels like another home. The people all feel like home, and just going to get coffee. Ran into like 5 different people who all gave me hugs and were so happy to see me. And
did you have like weird, like maybe butterflies, like coming up the hill, like it was like bringing you back to that first trip that you had, or no? Was it more gratitude?
It felt a little different because it wasn't as covered in snow, and we got some more green, so it's a little bit different scenery. Because I came in January, it was all white. But no, I just really excited. I'm sure Brian will be happy to hear this. I just kept on thinking about like when I get to see Brian, when I'm going to get to surprise him, because he doesn't know I'm coming. But that's one person I was excited to like pop around the corner.
That's pretty cool.
But I was just thinking about the people who were like wondering who I'm going to see, and yeah.
No, it's interesting, and we were kind of chatting about that topic yesterday. Before you go to a treatment center, you have all this anxiety and you're worried about what people think about it and that stigma. And then you get to experience it. And then if you're willing and you do all the right work, you're so grateful for the people that work there and the other clients that you've experienced this with, and it's like almost like going back to like a summer camp or a high school or a college and looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's really nostalgic coming back here, and it almost makes me emotional because I think about when I first came here, how broken I was. And coming back here with like this massive smile on my face and doing so well, it really is a moment of a lot of gratitude.
It's incredible.
It is.
So what our typical like structure for the show is, we'd like to get to know, our guests and what kind of like brought them to APN in the first place. What made them pick up the phone, ask for help, and then get into their experience at APN, whether it be with clinicians, other clientele, and or other services that we offer, and then, talk about life after APN. Yeah. So would love to hear from you about kind of life before APN and what those experiences were and what led you here.
Yeah. So there was something that happened end of last summer that then it was a few things that kind of trickled into each other, but I'm going to go back even further. I'm not going to dive into my childhood, but there's a couple events that I do want to touch on, because one of the things that's great about APN that's really special here is that you don't have to be struggling. You can, but you don't have to be struggling with substance abuse to get help. And a lot of the facilities all across the country are tailored towards people who have substance abuse problems. But if you have mental health or trauma issues but don't have a substance abuse problem, you can't get that help. And that's what's beautiful about APN is that you've got the addiction track, you've got the trauma track, and the mental health track, and you can do 1 or 3 or 2, and they customize your treatment. My history, I have... starting at 8 was when things got really apparent that things were not normal. In 3rd grade, I went to 4 schools, had a really tough year. And in 4th grade, I ended up staying home and being homeschooled on suicide watch. So that's where things started getting really challenging for me, was in elementary school. And I just remember growing up a Christian and remember thinking that the only reason that I couldn't, with a knife to my wrist, the only reason I couldn't do it was because I was afraid to go to hell. And no 8 or 9 or 10-year-old should be like that. So back then they didn't know that bipolar could be in kids. So they thought I had depression and they put me on either Prozac or Zoloft or something, which went really awry. And fast forward, so my childhood was difficult being bipolar, and then I was finally diagnosed with bipolar properly when I was in high school, as well as ADHD, which are common together. But when I was 15, I went to a party that I shouldn't have been at with some older girls. And when we walked in, there were a bunch of 20 or 30-year-old guys. And I was really uncomfortable. I knew I shouldn't be there. But I didn't listen to my gut, and I ended up being date raped with GHB, and I was raped, and then I had seizures, and was thrown out into the lawn, and they threatened our lives if we turned them in. And it took 3 of them to get me to a vehicle to get me to the hospital, and they didn't think I was going to make it. So that was the first time that I was almost killed for my body. Some other tough things happened, but then the next other major one to share is in 2008, I was attacked by 3 guys and taken to a cabin, sexually assaulted, and beaten within inches of my life. They threw me in a snowbank to die. And I was life flighted from Bozeman to Billings. I had frontal and occipital lobe bruising from the ricochet effect from having my head bashed down. And then I had brain hemorrhaging and cerebral edema, which is swelling of the brain. And that's what kills you fastest is as your brain starts touching your skull, it kills all the nerve endings there, or neurons. And I still have a skull fracture about this big right here. And when I was in the hospital, I was in a coma in Billings. And I got to a point where I just couldn't live anymore. And I was just hanging on by the skin of my teeth. And I survived 2 or 3 days. I don't even remember how many it was, but I remember the saliva would drip down my neck at like the speed of smell. And it was like Chinese water torture for days, just feeling it, because the base, your autonomic functions are at the base of your skull. That's so things like blinking, swallowing, those are things that I couldn't do on my own. And I prayed to God to take me and to take care. My daughter was 9 months old, and at the time I'd fought those days for her, and I literally didn't have any gas left in the tank. And I prayed that God would take me and that he would take care of my daughter, and that my mom would be able to raise her, or that her dad would be a great dad, and that I just trusted that God would provide. And as soon as I prayed for God to take me, my soul started separating from my body. And that's when I realized that I just chose to die. And if I chose to die, I can choose to live. Like, this is a choice. I have power here. I have agency. And so I prayed very rapidly in my head, and as my soul's separating from my solar plexus. And I said, I take it back, God. I take it back. I take it back. I can do this. I can fight. Please give me another chance. And my soul just snapped back into my solar plexus like a taut rubber band. And that's where things really changed for me as far as my perspective on life and how I live life. I was given a gift at 20 years old of being on my deathbed and knowing what it's like to die and look back on your life. And so there's a lot of things, a lot of gifts came from that. But those couple of experiences, and then in 2014, we lost a baby. And then I had we lost a baby that year, and less than a year later, my best friend died, and I had a plane ticket to go get her and to go see her and hopefully have her come back and live with us because she wasn't doing well. And I got a call the day before my flight left that she had passed. And then a few years later, my friend Eric shot himself in the head right in front of me. So I have all of these traumas that have been building and building and building, and when one thing happens, I can't really, I haven't had time to necessarily work on the next thing. Really, I didn't feel safe at all until I moved from Montana to Idaho. I always was afraid that they were going to come back and get me. They have DNA there were bruises head to toe, choke marks around my neck, blood and skin underneath my fingernails, so they have DNA. And when they, 6 months later or so after the incident happened, they called me and they said they'd actually arrested someone, and he didn't have an alibi, and that they were going to test the DNA, and then it didn't match, and so they let him go. And that really freaked me out because I was like, oh, now they know that the police are looking for them, and they're going to come back and shut me up. They know where I live. So I started doing a lot better just moving to Idaho, but then it was just like one trauma after the next. And then someone very close to me, he was only 26, he was my ex's little brother, so he was like a little brother to me. I'm still very close with their family, and he hung himself. And they waited for me to drive down to Missoula to be there when they pulled the plug. So I watched 2 people die in the matter of like 8 months. So all of that really built up, and it'd been a struggle. But what ended up happening is after my friend shot himself in the head, I was really, really screwed up for quite a while. It was very graphic. It was very tragic. It took about 30 to 45 minutes for him to die, and about 2 hours for services to get up to us where we were camping. and just being 2 feet from someone, and like we were looking each other in the eye and like watching the life go from his eyes. It was all just so terrible.
Brutal.
It was brutal. But I finally started getting back on my feet, but I'd been struggling, but I was doing better. And then I got really, really sick.
Real quick, not to interrupt you, during this process, was there therapist and psychologist, or was it just, you know what I mean? Were you seeking help throughout this?
Yeah, I've seen tons of different psychiatrists, therapists, counselors.
Okay.
I've done Reiki healing. I've done cord cutting and shadow work. And in fact, it's been all of the work that I did to heal myself that led me to become a healer. So it helped me, and that's where I became really passionate about helping others heal. But my daughter just turned 16. And end of last summer, I'll back up. So I got really sick November of 2021. I had 2 friends. I found out on the same day that I had 2 friends commit suicide on the same day. I found out about one Sunday morning and one Sunday afternoon. And so I went down to Bozeman the following weekend for the service. There was one service. There wasn't a service at the other one because he was in Washington. But I did help actually arrange to get the other person's ashes from the Seattle area to Bozeman, which was really special and cool. But that I got sick when I got into town for that funeral, and I never got better. I just kept getting worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. And I lost 45 pounds in 4 months, and I wasn't eating. I was throwing up all the time, passing out. My brain wasn't working, coughing fits where my lungs were on fire. Essentially, like everything in my body was shutting down, and they couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. So they're searching for cancer. I'm getting MRIs and X-rays and ultrasounds and mammograms, and had a colonoscopy. Like, we're trying everything to find out what's wrong. And when I had this rapid weight loss, my meds seemed to turn on me. And I'm releasing, one thing I learned is that when you lose a lot of weight rapidly, because we store trauma in our body, right? Mm-hmm. When you lose a lot of weight rapidly, you're exposing all this trauma, you're letting go of all this trauma, and now you have this incessant need to deal with it now. And so that was very difficult. I'm getting flooded with all of these emotions, and I became rapidly suicidal. I went to my psychiatrist and told them I'm in emergency mode. I need a med change now. And they were so negligent. I won't even go into it, but they didn't see me until June. And I don't know if it was March or April, but I ended up at a bridge. I don't even know how I ended up there. I just couldn't do it anymore. I was so sick. I didn't have my mental health, and I didn't have my physical health. And nobody could find out what was wrong with me, and I just broke. And I went to this bridge, and the dam was open, and it was roaring. It was pouring rain, and I was soaking, but the dam like vibrated my whole body. It was so intense. So in that moment, I got terrified. I was like, I can't jump. Like, it was too loud. It was the sound of it and the vibration. And so I called my friend, and they helped me. So I went to a restaurant up the road because I knew I couldn't be I shouldn't be driving. And a friend of mine helped me, and my other friend who owns the restaurant came down, and I honestly don't know what I would have done if I wouldn't have been in close vicinity of these people who I knew would help.
They answered the phone too.
They answered the phone.
Yeah.
Because I honestly don't know what I would have done if I didn't have that option to call that person. I tried calling a couple other people, and they didn't answer. So if they hadn't answered, I don't know what I would have done. It was a very challenging experience for me. But what was very interesting about it is what had led me there was, for weeks, this voice in my head, kill yourself, 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 all the time. And it was just incessant all the time. And it just was driving me crazy, and it was getting louder and louder. And I woke up the next morning, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't hear it. And it's very difficult to function in life when all your brain is saying is like you're trying to make plans, and your brain's chiming in like, it doesn't matter, you're going to kill yourself anyways. Mm-hmm. And I woke up the next morning, and it was like, because I had this moment, I felt like life was being imposed on me. Like I had to live this life non-consensually. But when I went to that bridge, I made a choice. I made a choice to wake up the next morning. And when I woke up the next morning, because it was a choice, all of a sudden, like, this voice had gone away. It was miraculous. And I started doing a lot better after that. But then my daughter has a little crew of 4, her and her best friend, and then her best friend's boyfriend, and then his best friend. And then she spends all summer in Helena with them together, with her best friend, they've been best friends since they were 4. Well, he committed suicide by gun, end of summer last year. And so helping my daughter through this experience, what I think happened is, I think as an empath, and this is my daughter, so I'm very emotionally close with her, I believe that helping her through this experience triggered me back into fight or flight mode. And all of a sudden, things around the house, just things between her and I, just started getting a lot more combative. And I was snapping really easy, and next thing you know, like, I'm going into full-on fight or flight mode.
You're both basically in trauma reactions at all times. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I found myself one day on the floor kicking and screaming, like pounding the ground with my fists, like a toddler having a fit. And I'm like, what is happening right now? And I realized that there was so much pent-up energy in me that I was going to explode if I didn't somehow physically get it out. And that's because instead of my prefrontal cortex working, instead it's my brainstem and my amygdala, and I've got all this adrenaline pumping for no reason. So my body's preparing to run from a bear, but really I'm just trying to talk to my kid.
You're sitting in the kitchen having a conversation, yeah.
And so I had, then I've had another experience where it happened on the road. I called her out on something and then went to the car. I'd fled from the store. Like, I left her in the store and I went to the car, and then I cried and I fled, and then she called me out on it while we were on the road. And I noticed that I'm starting to speed up and going in and out of traffic, not like 100 miles, but like 10, 15 over the speed limit. And I realized, oh my gosh, I'm fleeing right now. I'm literally trying to get away from my kid who's in the back seat. I'm in fight or flight mode. So once I recognized what was happening, then it was trying to reduce the triggers. And we tried our best, but teenagers and hormones, like, there are other life triggers, but those seemed to be the ones that were really getting me the most. And it was really damaging my relationship with my daughter, and we've always been really close and had a really healthy, authentic relationship. So it was really hard for us to both see this crumbling. And so I was going to get help in the summer, but then after a couple of those, they just started happening like in more succession. And I was like, I got to go now. I got to go get help now before I do something that I can't, and say something I can't take back. And my mom sent me a link to APN, and she said, in another place, and she said, check these places out. And I actually kind of gave her a little bit of attitude about why she would send me the APN link, because when she told me the price, I was like, well, I can't go here. Why are you like getting me all excited about this?
Wasting
place?
my time.
Yeah, why are you wasting my time and my excitement? Yeah. And she's like, you can put your insurance information on the website, like right there. And so I did. And then I really didn't think that. And then there was like a phone call interview kind of thing. And so I just didn't think that this was going to happen. Then when I found out what my insurance covered and that I was accepted to come if I wanted to come, it just felt way too good to be true. I think I was pinching myself for days. It really didn't hit until I was like on the plane.
Wow.
Yeah, wow is right.
Well, I guess first and foremost, like we appreciate how vulnerable and authentic you were. I could understand how hard that is to bring up, and wow, like I'm kind of speechless. But I want to give you all the credit in the world for being able to sit here with us and talk about it, and almost, you know, be happy to do that because knowing there's an opportunity to help others listening. So I give you all the credit in the world.
Thank you.
Yeah, the trauma piece of how it, like, and you mentioned it, like it's like you can't heal from one and then another one and then something else happens, and it's like playing catch up with healing one big T, right? You know, when we talk trauma, you know, we have another podcast, Therapy Unboxed. They discuss all different kind of modalities of therapy, but there's big T and little T. There's a lot of big traumas. And you can't just heal that in like one session, right? It takes a long time to heal those, right? So for that, this is like a process like ongoing, right? And continuing to figure out what's happening. Oh, it's a trauma reaction. Why is it happening? And then being able to heal that with spirituality and other things. It's it's a very, very, like Dan said, powerful story, and we thank you for your honesty and, you know, being authentic with us. It's I'm excited to hear about now. Like, hey, you were able to. Hey, I need to go somewhere. Now we're at APN. Now what did that look like being at APN and then being able to address all these traumas?
So there's one thing I want to share
Go
about
ahead.
how, because I know we have a lot of people in recovery who are going to be listening. I want to share how we store trauma, so that then I can talk about how we repair it. So what happens is when we have an event, our brain categorizes it, right? So we have an event, and we're like, oh, this is a school memory. This is a family memory. It's going to go in these file folders.
Mm-hmm.
And then when we have a traumatic event, then we're like, whoa, I don't know where this goes. I don't know where to file this. But right now, what I got to worry about is being safe. I have to find safety. I can't worry about processing this or filing this. So it goes in this junk drawer. And that's the subconscious.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens is once we're out of the trauma, once we're into safety, then that's the time we need to go back to the emotions and see how we felt about it, how we feel about it now, and work through those emotions. Pull it out of that junk drawer and then file it properly, and then it's not an issue. However, most of the time, once we're in safety, we either have another trauma, or forget, or don't know how to, or don't want to go back to those tough emotions to work through them. And that's when they get filed into the unconscious. It's important. The unconscious is a lot harder to access. So if you think about your consciousness as an iceberg, your consciousness, what you know, is the top of the iceberg above the water. The subconscious is the part of the iceberg that you can see through the murky water. It's like a little less clear, but you can still see it, and you can also access it on your own through meditation and journaling and self-work. Then you have the unconscious, and that's where the most of like the bulk of stuff is. But it's pitch black, and we have no idea what's there.
No idea.
But like Carl Jung says, as long as the unconscious stays unconscious, it will rule your life, and you will call it fate. So what motivates us and what drives us is in our unconscious. So if you have reoccurring thought patterns and behaviors that you can't, and you're like, why do I keep on finding myself with this kind of person? Or I can't make more than this amount of money, or I can't this or that. This thing keeps on happening to me. It's because you're attracting that into your life through your unconscious. So we have to get to the unconscious. How do we get there? So that's where things like shadow work comes in. It's great to work with different types of healers and try different types of modalities like EMDR and cord cutting and hypnosis.
Brain
and,
spotting.
Whatever. Try things out and find what works for you. But when we can shine a light on the things that's hiding in the dark, it loses its power. Now it's illuminated, it loses its power, and now we have power again. We regain our control. So we just have to be courageous and disciplined to go back to those places that are difficult and say, bring it on. I'm going to work through it. So that's having that background before I came here allowed me to really hit the ground running because I already had a lot of the tools in my tool belt to just get going. So when I came here, I remember on my first day, it was kind of a shit show. People were complaining about stuff and they were pretty upset in groups. And I just remember being like, oh no. And I thought to myself, I was like, all right, I've got two choices here. I can let this get to me and I can stress out about it, or I can let it not be my problem because this isn't my fucking problem, is it? It's not. So unless it touches me, not my fucking problem. And that was what I did. And when it touched me, then it was my problem, and then we figured it out. And so that was great. I think the most important thing about challenges here is just being your own self-advocate and being respectful to staff to help get what you need, and just being your own advocate. But after that, it seemed like everything went pretty smooth. And what I noticed was I did have to be my own advocate to get into trauma classes because I wasn't put into trauma initially. And so my first week, I was like, where's my trauma stuff? I hear there's this trauma thing and this trauma thing. Why am I not in it? So I got myself put in the trauma stuff. But I also I did assignments that I was assigned, and then I also did assignments other people were assigned. I'd see something, and I'm like, I'm doing that. So I did the mask. I did my trauma body map, and that one was really intense. In fact, I didn't share that with the whole class like other people did. I instead handpicked the people that I wanted to share it with and did my own little presentation because some of my story is so extreme and to some people unbelievable, or like I just wanted to make sure it was a safe space to share my story without judgment from people who maybe I didn't feel safe with. The trauma map was something that I definitely encourage everybody does, the body map.
Can you tell us a little bit about that trauma map? What does that practice look like? So with the body map, there's a big roll of paper they have here, and you put your body down and have somebody trace it. What's interesting is on mine, I actually did my body like this, like twisted up, kind of like a dead body almost, because that was the position my body was in when I was like a rag doll when I was raped when I was 15 on GHB. That represented my inability to move, and like because I tried screaming and nothing would come out. I couldn't move, like I was just frozen.
Was that conscious or unconscious to get traced on the body map?
That was conscious, right. Yeah. And then you go. I did lots of different colors, but I went through and drew the different traumas on my body from different experiences. So I put a lot of names around mine of people I lost as well. But like, I'm trying to think of, I can see it, but I can't think of all the things that are on it. But what's really incredible about it is, especially if you've had a lot of trauma, seeing it all together was like, whoa. no wonder I'm fucked up.
Yeah.
It was really validating to see images representing my pain and be like, yeah, this is a lot. My whole body was just covered.
Are you strategic in where you place certain things on like the picture of the body?
Well, mostly everything has is in the place where the
Where it
trauma
happened. Yeah.
occurred, but it was hard to do some of them, like like I had bruises for the choke marks around my neck. Like my skull is swelling up with blood. There's scissors from the tube ectopic, having my tube removed. There's scars from my appendectomy. I put symbols like ice, snowflakes, and fire in my lungs because that's what it felt like when I was sick. There was a gun in one hand to represent both watching someone be shot as well as having almost committed suicide by gun myself. And then a liquor bottle in the other hand for all the damage I'd done to myself with all of my drinking over the years. So yeah, it was, and then my lips were sewn shut. What I found to actually be even more impactful, though, was the trauma timeline. So I did the trauma timeline in my journal first, and I color-coded them. So there's like familial traumas, like family, like divorce and like things like that. And then there's death traumas, and then we've got like sexual traumas, and then physical traumas like car accidents. And
Yeah.
So I color coded them, and then I use those big pieces of paper, and I shit you not, that trauma timeline was as long as twice the distance of this room. It was 5 of those big sheets, and it filled up the whole room. And looking at that, and then I sent it to some people, and they were just like, whoa. And that was just validating for me because I've never before, I've never met anyone who has a conglomeration of trauma like mine.
And to see it.
So it feels unbelievable and unfathomable to me a lot of the time. And so to see it on paper and be like, I went through that shit, and I'm still here.
Still here.
It was, again, just very validating and
Very powerful.
Very powerful. Yeah. And an incredible way for me to communicate to my loved ones the pain that I've been going through that they couldn't understand. To have these...
Yeah, the assignments, right? They're such like the doorway into it, right? And whether it's, we've heard clients discuss the trauma egg, but the timeline and the body map, it's just ways for the therapist to kind of get into starting to deal with the trauma with our clients. And it's interesting for you, the way you describe them. It's very, I think it'll help our listeners kind of understand that process.
I think the letters are the most important thing that I did. I wrote so many letters, so many letters, and any time that something would come up, I'm like, I'm gonna write them a letter. And the processing, it's so funny because Brandy encouraged me to write a letter to my dog, Steve, who we had to put down the day after my friend shot himself. We came home and he was dying. He was sick, and we needed to put him down, but we couldn't because we had to go to the funeral. Then, literally the next day, and so we went to the funeral, and then we came home and had to put him down. And it was so difficult, not only because you're putting a pet down, but I couldn't even shed a tear. I had cried so much the last 48 hours. I couldn't even mourn the loss of my dog. And it was very frustrating and challenging that I couldn't give those emotions in that moment that I needed. And so she encouraged me, I'm writing these really intense letters to, different people, and she encouraged me to do the one to my dog. And I didn't think it would be that profound for me, but it really was. It gave me closure. I didn't realize I was lacking.
So something else you kind of talked about earlier, which I think will be kind of powerful probably, or I'm guessing it was for you, is when you said you selected a couple people to go over some of your trauma assignments with. How was the process? Like, how cathartic was it to like voice it to people that you felt safe with in a trusted environment? How did that process of the assignment go? Or am I seeing it wrong? Was it more about making the assignment?
No, delivering it was just as important.
Yeah.
Gut-wrenching. At the end, all of us felt ill.
Okay.
Everybody felt sick, and we were headed to dinner, and everyone's like, "Can anyone eat?" I think we were headed to dinner.
There's so much energy people are absorbing.
Well,
yeah.
And there's a lot more that I haven't shared here. When you put it all together, it's just gross. And it's very difficult to digest. And so for these people who'd never heard it before, it was like all they could take plus some.
Yeah.
And so, but the fact that my friends and these people who cared so much about me were willing to, they made a bodily sacrifice. They knew, they had a feeling going into this, they were going to have some visceral responses. And they were willing to do that, to go through this experience, the sharing experience with me, which I appreciated. And the fact that my experience sharing it kind of made them ill also, again, was just validating for these things that my whole life I felt like were my fault, or
you had to carry it alone.
I had to carry, or shame and guilt. And that's one of my favorite things that we talk about here is, guilt is I did something wrong, and shame is I am bad.
Yeah.
I did something bad versus I am bad.
Well, the reason I ask that is because we always get such a reaction about how much love and support not only do our alumni get from staff, but from their peers, right? And these relationships that people build within 30 or 60 days while they're here is like life-changing in a great way. And you started to already discuss that, but that's why I was kind of asking you that question, so you could kind of highlight that aspect even a little more for us.
Yeah. In fact, one of the people that I'm seeing tomorrow is one of the people that I shared with. I shared, what I would encourage people to do is if anybody gets an assignment and it piques your interest at all, just do it. You don't take the initiative. You don't need someone to tell you to do it. Just do it because it's for your own growth. But doing those assignments is like a lot of the value, and then sharing them with your peers is a lot too, because they validate you, they support you, they ask good questions, they make good suggestions, and they support you. And just in that, having other people, one of the things I love about coming here to APN and the friends that I've made here is like everybody here gets it. Like I don't have to explain things that I have to explain to other people, because you just get it. You have already struggled with, you have the same like mental voices and challenges that I do. And it's so valuable to have friends that support you who understand that kind of stuff. It's a different type of relationship. And I'm reading a book right now, and we can get into that in a second. But they really recommend that you read this book with other people so that you can grow together, and that so you can ask each other the big questions. And it doesn't matter if you have the same answer, but talking about the big ideas and exploring those things with other people who understand it is important too. I think that there's conversations and breakthroughs that we can have together that are so valuable if we're willing to take the time and invest and connect with one another.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. I'm kind of curious to hear about your experiences with TMS and Stella while you were at the lodge.
Yeah, let me take a drink real quick. So TMS, I found it's so interesting because when I get in the TMS machine, like it's like a woodpecker, like on your head, which is not what I was expecting. But as soon as they put that little like cap on you, it like cradles your head. They put the Velcro around and it's like cradles your head and it's like you're in the womb again. And I just like feel safe. And so I'd normally just, once I did that, I'd just sit here like this and just go into kind of a meditative state. I really enjoyed that. On the stellate ganglion nerve block, I know that people have, like, they generally seem to either have like a really profound experience with it where they're like, snap of a finger, I felt it, or not. I did not have an immediate snap of the finger response to it like some people did. And I knew I had the option to do the other side, which other people did, but I didn't do the other side. And here's the reason for it. When I came in, my PHQ-9 score, is that right? Was 22, and I believe the highest that goes is 27. And 22 is in the most severe category for depression and anxiety. When the day before I got the stellate ganglion nerve block, my PHQ-9 score was 8.
Oh, wow.
So all of the work I did while I was here, plus the TMS, had already gotten me from severe down to at 4. They say you don't need any treatment. So I was really close to like,
you did good work.
So I think had I got the SGB early on, I think I probably may have had a different experience feeling it immediately. But with my anxiety and depression already improved, I didn't see like a super dramatic shift. But what I did notice is when I got home, things that would put me into fight or flight before I left don't now. So even things that would give me anxiety or make me nervous or stressed before don't as much now. I have more control over my peace.
We would like describe that too, right? Like, it's like, hey, people think like, hey, if you work on yourself, you don't have any more problems. Like, no, the problems are still there, but they don't cripple me.
Exactly.
Like on a scale of 1 to 10, they used to be like a 12, right? And now it's more of like a 5 where I can deal with it and still process.
Mm-hmm. When I came here, my brain was controlling me. I was not in control of my brain. I was not in control of my emotions. I was not in control of my behavior. I was not in control of my emotion, like anything. And now I feel like I have total agency and autonomy.
It's incredible. You mentioned earlier that you were very close with your daughter. And then I guess a few months before you came to APN, you guys were butting heads a bit. While you were at APN, did you utilize any of our family services or family therapy?
We did do a couple sessions. It was very difficult to do them because she had softball, she had school and sports. And it was actually her feedback to me that she's like, Mom, I don't really want to do like the family therapy. She's like, now that we've got some of this stuff on the table, I feel like we're capable of having these conversations on our own, and I don't think we need a third party involved. And she expressed that she felt good about our ability to resolve our issues together without a third party. And I said, okay.
And how was that process in talking with her and resolving whatever was out there?
We're still like, it's like over time, but things are going really well. I feel like it's like 50-50. One, I'm calm, cool, collected, happy, so I can communicate with her the way that I should. And she's being more respectful and making an effort to stop and think about how things affect me instead of just like, Mom, do this, or I need this. Or so I think we're both doing a better job of just stopping and thinking about what's about to come out of our mouths and how we're going to say it before we do. And when we are treating with each other with respect, we tend to continue to do that. But we're both, I mean, she's my daughter. She's a fucking firecracker. So, so if either of us starts to get a little bit snappy at the other one's got quite an attitude about like, how dare you talk to me about? Yeah.
No, it's great. And listen, I think whether or not she's told you this, and I'm sure she has, like you've done an amazing job from where you were to where you are today. And I'm sure she appreciates all the hard work and dedication you put towards yourself over these last few months.
And to piggyback on that, most people learn more with their eyes than their ears. So to see Mom work, like trying to work on herself and figure out, what's happened, you know what I mean? Instead of just like, hey, I'll figure it out next week, right? And the next week turns into 50 years, right? So to see you do that, like what an example for your daughter. And then I'm sure she's learned, hey, if I got to communicate something, I better communicate it and not just shove it down. Mm-hmm. That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, I'm still kind of like shaking a little bit from the story. I think it's something that is incredible for you to be sitting here today.
Yeah, absolutely.
And be able to be comfortable in your own skin and to be confident enough to talk about it. And I think most of all, and you talked about it before, is to share your story to help others, and that there are solutions to get help. And you do have that support. You don't have to go down those negative paths because you don't think there are.
Mm-hmm. I think the most important thing that we can do is take that journey, which is, in my opinion, the longest journey we'll ever take in our lifetime, is that journey from the head to the heart. And I think when we practice moving from the head to the heart and listening to our soul and connecting with other spirits authentically, that's when healing really happens. But as long as we stay rigid and we have to be in control or have control, do you remember that book of Mice and Men?
Lenny.
This is one of my favorite philosophies of just like love. I love loosely, like my husband, my daughter, and my best friend, like, because I love in that book how he has that mouse that he loves, and he loves it so much that he crushes it and he suffocates it and kills it. And so we have to love loosely and control loosely. And when you leave it room to breathe,
it'll thrive.
Yeah.
I love that.
Incredible.
I love that.
Well, thank you again for joining us. Again, incredible. And we're so happy that you're doing well and you're here to share your story.
Can I ask you a question before we go?
Absolutely.
So I I'd made a note. There was another episode where someone asked questions. I was like, I have a question. So I'm reading this book, and my thought was after APN, I thought I was going to go to school, get my social work degree to become a trauma counselor. Looking into that further, I realized that's probably not the best way to make the difference I want to make. So I'm working, I'm chewing on what I want to do, but I realize that what I have to do is backwards engineer my life. First, I need to find out where I want to be and what I want in my life, and then how am I going to get that, and then how am I going to get there. So who am I now? Who do I want to be? How am I going to get there? What challenges do I expect? And this book came up that I just read. It's been amazing. It came up on the TV. Like, I asked the universe for a sign to point me in the right direction. And it was literally like there was no TV on, and it was like the TV turned on, and I looked over at it, and it was like this new book called Life Worth Living. And it's written by 3 people, 1 or 2 of which are the professors who teach the course by the same name at Yale.
Oh, wow.
And what's interesting is the big question being, how do you define a life worth living? And if you ask most people, they'll say a life worth living is long, happy, and healthy. But if you don't have those things, is life still worth living? If it's not long, Martin Luther King Jr., short life, worth living.
Mm-hmm.
Abraham Lincoln, melancholy, not happy. Life worth living. Job, he was sick, and he got everything taken from him, but life worth living, right? So if those don't define a life worth living, what does? And then part 2 of the question is, I'll just stop there with that. It's a pretty loaded question in its own.
Me or you, bub?
You can go. I'll go next.
So Dan's busted my chops in here before, but we used the term God's economy, right, versus the world's, society's, economy, right? And I think that's judged by, how many people we can help, right? We're only judged by what we give away here. It's kind of like paradox. Instead of like, hey, how much money can I have? How much my job, my house, my car. So if I can trying to live in that spirituality phase of how can I help people, who can I help, and where can I be the most helpful in my life, and I focus on that, I find purpose, I find satisfaction and being content. But when I get into the society, and hey, this car sucks. My tax return's only that much. Like, what am I gonna? I need to buy this. That's when I feel no purpose, and that's when I kind of go backwards into not having spiritual satisfaction or whatever, or I kind of feel empty. So when I live in that other world, which doesn't make sense, of trying to help people, doesn't really matter my outside circumstances. I feel a little more purpose, or kind of the way you worded it. I don't know if I answered the question or if I went down weird rabbit holes.
Oh, that answers it, yeah.
There we go.
Yeah, I think as I digest the question, I think in layman's terms, off the bat, what makes life worth living, right? I think
family,
everything.
Yeah.
And so it's there's always going to be a purpose in my life that it's worth living. I'll never say that if it's not long, if it's not healthy, if it's not wealthy, if it's not loving, caring, it's not worth living, because there's always something to be achieved. But I think going back to breaking down the question and asking, what's going to make my life worth living? What are the attributes that I want to live a happy life? What's going to give me that purpose? I think it goes back to your core values. Everyone is a different individual, and everyone has their own core values. Some people it's family, some people it's service work, some people it's the company they work for, some people it's the relationships or their kids. There's or even being just authentic and honest. And there's so many different attributes to make what you want your life to be. And I think for me, it's making sure that that's front and center, understanding what my core values are as an individual, and making sure that I'm achieving those and showing up authentic to each of those each and every day is what's going to make me happy, right? And what's going to like enjoy my life. But I always think that life is always worth living. You just have to figure out like what that purpose is each day.
And that continues to adjust too, right? And that's awesome. It's a good answer, pal.
Some of the other questions that you don't have to answer, but just ponder on that I'm journaling on right now are things like, also, to whom do we owe anything in the way that we live our lives? Should I have full autonomy in how I live my life? Like, because this is my life. Or do I owe something to my spouse, my children, my community, my planet, and how I live my life? And then who's to determine whether or not we're living a life worth our humanity? But when you think about it, we use up resources. We affect this planet. So, like, we have this one moment here on Earth, which really is, like, incredibly, incredibly tiny in the span of time and space. But I like pondering these questions because we only get one trip around the sun. And if we don't ask ourselves, what are we doing here? Then what are we doing here?
Yeah.
Deep.
I would say those answers are going to be different from everyone.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And I think it's, you know, based off of each individual's like relationships they have with, you know, their spouse or their family or their occupation, and whatever it is. And so it's like some people may strongly disagree with another because maybe they don't have that relationship, or maybe their significant other didn't have that experience. They didn't have that experience with that significant other. So maybe they don't owe that person anything.
Well, everybody's answer is going to be totally different because everybody has their own opinions and experiences and what's important to them.
Totally.
And their own gifts to share too. Just like we all have our demons, we all have gifts too.
Totally. But thank you for those questions. Appreciate it.
I think that's a unique opportunity to ask our listeners how they would answer that question. So if you're watching this on Instagram, YouTube, you know, leave us a comment. And how do you define what makes a life worth living?
Absolutely. Thanks, Keith.
Love that.
So if you liked what you saw and you want to see more of our episodes, you could visit us at apn.com/podcast. That's apn.com/podcast. If you do have any comments or questions for us, please feel free to email us at pod@apn.com. Thank you again for listening. Please like and subscribe to the video and the channel. Thank you again, and thank you, Jenny.
Thank you,
Thanks
guys.
for coming on, Jenny.
Thanks for having me.